Hello, it's July 2023, and over the many years, I've highlighted, for example, how people in various positions of authority, such as, but not limited to, police, judges, lawyers, prosecutors, can lie, and I emphasize, can lie, cheat, and steal to, for example, convict an innocent person. Now, I've also highlighted, for example, how a lot of these people really don't care. It becomes a challenge, like how do we do this to, for example, win a case, whatever. I've highlighted that, as well as people simply believing, and to believe is to make an uninformed conclusion that this person must have did something wrong, etc. I've highlighted all these things. I've also talked about the impact this has on someone, for example, who has been wrongfully convicted. In my story, without reiterating the whole story, again, there's plenty of videos about that, shows how an innocent person is convicted. Now, I'm just going to segue for a moment. Why is this important? Because the injustice, which is a form of tyranny, that happens to individuals, countless of individuals, every day, can happen to anyone, especially in the world that we live in now, with, for example, social justice movements and things being imposed, etc. You know what I'm talking about. So the laws are becoming more and more, what's the term I'm looking for? It's micromanaging to the point where it's beyond ridiculous. Now, I've highlighted in some videos over the years how, for example, crime rates, actual crime rates, have dropped, yet the police, the courts, and the prison system is at an all-time high, because more and more so-called laws are being introduced as a form of micromanaging, and people are not committing crimes, but they're still having to go through the criminal process. Now, one example, I'm just going to segue for a moment here, is when you look at the drinking and driving laws. And I'm not advocating that if you're completely drunk and everything else, you're okay to drive. Not at all. But what we've seen since its conception is the bar has been lowered all the time, to the point now where, and perhaps this may be a bit of an exaggeration, but if you had a drink 2 weeks ago, they can still detect it in your system, and you're driving 2 weeks later, there you go. And there's actually, I did an overlay, I used an overlay in a video this past, I believe, 6 months, where there are laws that if you had a drink yesterday, and they can still track it in your system and you're driving, you can still be dinged for impaired. So that's just an example of a perceived micromanaging and how the laws are being created to ensure that the people in the, for example, overall justice system have work. And then when they have too much work, yeah, they'll just drop a bunch of those cases. But they always have work. But I digress. Now, over the many years, especially the past several years, people have been crying out that these people need to be held accountable. But there's a term, and Canada has its own variation of this, something that's called qualified immunity, where any government official, a person in any type of position of authority, cannot be held accountable. A lot of people are not aware of that. This qualified immunity protects people who work for the government from any wrongdoings. Now, I'm going to segue for a moment. A part of that, in some scenarios, the victim of, say, a wrongdoing needs to be found guilty, and this slides into wrongful convictions, why people, especially when there's government officials involved, need to be found guilty or found at fault or whatever. So that's part of the defense. If the victim of a wrongdoing by a government official is done, that's their defense for the lawsuit. And I've highlighted that with my story as well. So when people want government officials anywhere, say from a president or a prime minister to a state senator to whatever, being held accountable and wanting government officials who are, for example, part of a medical profession, all these people, they want them to be held accountable. While putting aside that they can, I want to again stress, they can, which means not all do, lie, cheat, and steal to protect themselves, there's also the qualified immunity defense, which is the first go-to. And when all else fails, they can lie, cheat, and steal to protect themselves, which we see daily. So when a lot of people are doing these so-called mock trials and all these things to hold whomever accountable for whatever, on whatever topic, they don't realize that there's no value to it. They try to rely on nonsensical things, codes from after, for example, World War II, and not even ever reading it, but it's just an urban legend that has been, or an urban myth that has just been talked about so much, and then people just assume that someone else did the research. And I've broken that down several years ago, saying it doesn't apply type of thing. But no one's going to be held accountable because of qualified immunity. And that's something that people should really take the time to look into, and look into the case law that supports that, both Canada, US, and I'm sure every other country has their own version of it. Anyway, I just wanted to highlight this, bring this to the forefront, because I'm sure a lot of people are not aware of it, and hopefully you've learned something. Thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe, comment, and share.
Listen to this and write it down if you can't remember it. You're never going to outgrow warfare. You simply must learn to fight. I hear people saying to me, oh, when is it going to get easier? When you die.